And so running races like New York City or Boston, when all of a sudden you go through the screen tunnel, everyone is there being like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I can't wait. I'm so excited for the noise and the music." And in my mind, I'm like, I am going to explode through this experience. And I just have to figure out what to do.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Really happy to have you here. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Really appreciate you all being here. I hope that you had a good Thanksgiving weekend. To all of you Americans listening, most of you are American, so that's why I'm saying this here. I'm probably on my way home from the US when this episode comes out, so I thought that I would just record this a week and a half prior to this episode coming out. Just really excited for all of you guys to be here. If you want to do me a favor, head over to your app or into your app and give this podcast a follow and a review. We really appreciate that. And remember that the Marathon Podcast is also on YouTube, so you can watch all the videos there if you are not listening and watching in the Spotify app. Today I have Chiara with me, and Chiara is a very fast runner. She's a sub-3 marathoner, but she's facing something that most of us are not facing, and that is running with autism. She was fairly recently diagnosed, but obviously she's had the same issues and challenges that any person with autism has had for her whole life. And she shares openly about the challenges and some of the strengths that she has or she gets from having autism. But I am very impressed with how she's dealing with all of this. And I also know that one of the reasons why she wanted to come on was to share this story to help others, but also to kind of share these experiences the other way so that people can share with her and maybe comment down below if you have any experiences with it. Because running with autism is a challenge that I don't think any of us can really comprehend and understand, especially with a major marathon. And Chiara shares all about this in this episode. So excited to share this episode with Chiara with you guys, and I hope that you will enjoy it. And also know that I think that this episode is not just for people with autism. I think that this episode is an amazing listen and a great way to understand other people and the challenges they go through. So maybe a bad knee isn't that bad after all when it comes to a marathon. Okay, so Chiara, welcome to the Marathon Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you here too. We're chatting a bit about the podcast, I guess, and then you told me about some of the challenges that you've faced as a marathon runner, and that is kind of, I guess, the main motivation for having you on, but you're also a fast marathoner. Will you just say something about your running journey and your background as a runner?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because growing up my whole life, the main sport that I've played was golf, which doesn't translate into running much, which is kind of funny. But I started, and I've always been kind of a casual runner, running 5K here, 5K there, very sporadic. But in the summer of 2022, after I graduated college and then moved to Pittsburgh, where I lived for 3 years, since I didn't know anyone, I didn't have family, didn't have any friends nearby, uh, I was I didn't have a car, so I couldn't move around, I couldn't go into my office frequently, so I wasn't even seeing coworkers. I decided to join a run club, and from there, I made a lot of friends in that run club, started to run a little bit more, and everyone there was training for different races, including the Pittsburgh Marathon. And I had never raced. I think the longest race I did was actually that November when I did a 10-mile race. And then from there, everyone was like, "Oh, we're all doing the Pittsburgh Marathon. You should join." And I was just like, "Okay." And so I signed up for the marathon and I loved it. And since then, I decided to actually get a running coach to see how I could improve in the sport. And I've now just finished the New York City Marathon 2 weeks ago, and that was my sixth So since May of 2023 to November of 2025, I've done 6 marathons.
That is really impressive. And I don't think you mentioned your PR, because that is a very impressive one as well.
Oh, thank you. My PR is in Eugene, so Eugene, Oregon, which I ran this past April, and it's a 2:58:04. So,
Yeah, that's really, really good. Okay,
thank you.
so now we know a little bit about your running background, and we're obviously going to talk mostly about running and how that has been like for you. But why don't you present yourself, who you are outside of running? And like we talked about before, you have a very interesting story about your kind of your nationalities, because on your Instagram you have so many flags,
Yeah.
and it can be hard to keep up. So will you just
That
explain that one more time?
Absolutely. It's hard to explain. So the short answer is I'm Italian. That's my passport. That's, that. However, the real answer is a little bit trickier because I was born in France. But then when I was 1 year old, I moved to Italy, which is where my family's from. But then when I was 6 or 7, around 6, 7, so in 2007, that's when I moved to Spain. And so been in Madrid, stayed in Madrid until graduating high school, and then I moved to the United States. And that's when I studied college, and then I moved to Pittsburgh for 3 years. So I was there for a total of 7 years, and I just came back at the end of May to Spain. However, then there's the other component to it, which is my mom, she is Italian, but she grew up in the US. And so I have family that's actually from just outside New York City, from the Westchester area, who are completely American, don't speak any Italian whatsoever. So growing up, I had to learn English. So that's why a lot of people get confused when they hear my accent and they're like, "But you don't sound Italian." It's like, "No, I've been speaking English my whole life and I've just been exposed to the American accent."
Yeah, because even when you told me when we were chatting yesterday on or 2 days ago on Instagram, you told me about this, but I was definitely kind of expecting more of an accent, and I doubt that people listening to this intro now ever could have guessed that you were from Italy.
Yeah, no, there's small words or expressions that I say in each language that will confuse people, being like, "Wait, something is off," or I'll use American expressions in the wrong way, or I'll use British terms because in
Yeah,
school here you learn British English, which you
yeah,
might know.
same
I
in
don't know if it's the
Norway.
same in
In
Norway.
or in Norway, they actually, I think it's as simple as whatever English the teacher speaks, that's what they
Mm,
kind of will teach you. And I'm not sure if they will actually correct you. So if I was in school and since I'm engaged to an American now, like I'm always writing in American English, but I'm sure there are times where I'm like, maybe there's a British word coming in here or there,
yeah.
but I
I
don't know.
I've definitely had terms like I'll tell people that I'm packing a trolley to travel, and
Mm-hmm.
all my American friends would look at me and be like, "You're a a train trolley?" And I'm like, "No, the trolley, the tiny suitcase, the carry-on."
I yeah, I think that is funny with Europeans. Yeah, Christine, my fiance, she said it too, that in Norway you have no idea what to expect when you speak to people, because you might head in, like if you walk into a meeting and there are like the room is full of Norwegians, you
Mm,
could either have Norwegians with a Norwegian accent, which will
mm.
sound very much like this. Hello, I'm from Norway. My name is Christian. And then you have some people being super British, like an exaggerated British accent, or you will have American, and every now and then you will find like New Zealand or
Wow.
Australian. That is usually if people were like exchange students and they spent
Mm,
like a year or two there. So I have
yeah,
a friend and her accent is perfect New Zealand. At least in my eyes, it's perfect New
yeah.
Zealand accent. It's definitely
Wow.
sounds like New Zealand. So it's an interesting thing with the
Yeah.
nationalities there.
Absolutely, but the language then is super helpful because especially, with my job, 'cause, I worked for 3 years as a solutions engineer for a simulation software company, and now I just started a new job as an analyst at a consulting firm. And it's been very helpful to know multiple languages. And a lot of people get thrown off when I explain that if they want, I can continue the conversation in their native tongue, whether that be Italian or Spanish. And they look at me being like, do we really trust how good your Spanish or your Italian is? And then I start and they realize, oh, you're fluent.
Yeah. But what about French? Do you know any French or
I
was
actually
yeah.
don't. Unfortunately, I do not. I can sometimes pick up words and understand them, but I can't speak it. So I know Italian, Spanish, and English.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. And I guess it's also for the especially American listeners here, it can be hard to understand how you can be fluent in both Italian and Spanish. But I guess you have the advantage of those languages being not the same, but similar to each other,
They
so
are.
that you can kind of, when you start, I don't know if you call it study Spanish after
Mhm.
or coming from Italy. I don't know what your take is on that.
Oh, I mean, it's significantly easier to pick it up. They're both Romance languages. There's a lot of similarities to them. But then you have to be kind of careful with certain terms because they're very similar to both languages, but mean completely different things.
Ah.
So I've been caught many a times as a 12-year-old trying to say that I'm embarrassed. And in Italian, that's imbarazzato. So very similar. But then in Spanish, if I couldn't remember vergüenza, which is the Spanish word, I would say embarazada, which means
Hmm.
pregnant. So as a 12-year-old walking around telling people I'm pregnant,
Yeah.
not great.
Not great. No. No, that is funny. We have some of those in Norwegian to English where
Mm.
it just makes, or we think that it makes sense
Yeah.
to, so like when you have, spikes, for instance, under your
Mhm.
shoes or on your tires, in Norwegian that word is pig, and with most Norwegians will think that, oh, it's just like you say pig tires or pig shoes, but that is obviously a very different meaning when you say it in
That's
English.
very funny. That's very
Yeah.
funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we have some of those, and we have a
Yeah.
famous rally driver from Norway, and his English wasn't that good, and then so he kind of just
Mm,
translated things, and so he was gonna say
yeah.
that it's not the speed that actually kills you, it's that sudden crash,
Mm.
and then he used Norwegian words, and in Norwegian it would make sense, obviously, but he then combined English and Norwegian, and then he said it's not the fart that kills you, it's the smell, and that kind of ended up being the most hilarious thing that a Norwegian person's ever said in English, I think, or in
Oh,
Norwegian English.
that should be on a shirt. That's amazing.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Okay, so this podcast is obviously not about languages, although that is also very fascinating. I actually speak Dutch myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a very random thing I learned. I just learned online because I was a speed skater and had a lot of Dutch friends. But okay, so we're gonna talk about running, obviously, and you gave us a short brief of, or like brief introduction to how you've been, like how you kind of started running and how that has been. But I want to just kind of cut to the chase in terms of what we talked about that really intrigued me. But I guess like we have to go back a bit to kind of give that an introduction as well. But you told me that you like when you ran New York. Now it's that the first marathon that you ran after you were diagnosed with autism?
Yes, yes, that was
Yeah.
the first marathon that so a little bit of context, for that. I was diagnosed in September with autism, which is something that I had thought about for a long time, and then when obviously getting diagnosed and talking to professionals about, it made me realize, wow, this has definitely severely impacted my whole life, and I just never realized it. Or I always thought that I was weird or different or just couldn't fit in, and I just had to figure out what to do in order to fit in. And so New York was, well, it was technically my second race since being diagnosed because I did the Copenhagen half marathon in September. But there was the first marathon, and more specifically, it was the first time that I ran without headphones. I've always run races with headphones, and funny enough, I've only listened to the same songs. Like have the same songs, the same music, and I
The
always
same
thought,
the same one song or
"No,
just
no,
a
no, no,
play?
I have a
Okay,
set of songs.
okay,
No, no, I don't listen to
okay,
the
good.
same song all the time." But
That
it
would
is
have
the
been
same
exhausting.
n n it's the same music, it's music that I know, it's music that I know the beats, it's music that I'm very familiar with, and so I've actually never enjoyed trying to find new songs, 'cause it's very hard for me to find new songs that I like, because I'm very sensitive to noises. I am someone who's extremely sensitive to noise and to music, so I never listen to music unless I'm running. That's really the only time when I listen to music, and again, it's the same songs. But New York, everyone tells you, "Oh, New York, you have to do it without headphones. You have to just experience the crowds." So I was intrigued, and I realized when I was running New York that I actually can't run without headphones. And it's not because I got bored and I wanted to listen to my music. The crowds, they are impressive and they're very loud, and there's drums, and there's music constantly changing, and there's cheering and screaming. I got really overwhelmed. I could feel the anxiety building up to the point where when we were going through Brooklyn and entering then Queens, where there's like the biggest almost roar, I kind of wanted to step aside and cry for a little bit and just try and calm myself down because it got so overwhelming. Most runners will see Queensboro Bridge as the, like, worst part of the race, and for me, that was almost my salvation. I enjoyed Queensboro so much because it was so silent, and for most runners, that's terrible because there's a hill and, it's so silent, you're at mile 16, you're only you're just over halfway. But for me, that those few moments where there was no one, or you're entering a street where there's not a lot of people, or the bridges where there's no one there, those were the best parts for me to calm myself down and self-regulate. And so for me, music, because it's a known sound, it's a sound that I'm comfortable with and it can help dampen the surrounding noises, it's essential for me.
Wow. Yeah, because I think I want to ask you before we even talk more about, your own experiences, because and I also want to emphasize that I always find it intimidating to ask questions about, conditions or diagnosis that I am not familiar with.
Mhm.
And so I apologize to you or to the listeners if I ask like the wrong questions. But I feel like to a lot of people, or at least in my experience, that we are kind of, when you hear about autism, you think about the movies you've seen, you think about like Rain Man,
Yep.
and and I'm sure that there are very different levels of autism in terms of how well you cope with it in your everyday life with
Yep.
running, like you said. Will you kind of just give us a brief explanation of autism and also the different levels of it, and then obviously
Yep.
where you are on that?
Yep. So I can try. I'm not this is all so new to me, so I am myself still trying to navigate what exactly it entails, etc. But for me, my condition, for example, with autism, that was one of the biggest issues. Was I've always grown up, as a good student, getting good grades. I didn't have issues necessarily talking one on one with people. And I was very independent, so it was never a thought, like, it was never, like, the typical, as you see, the typical movies or the typical shows, like, you see, all those different, representations of autism, so you see yourself or people see you and they're like, "Oh, you don't have, like, there's no way." But then there's all these small pieces that instead I would be categorized as rude, weird, antisocial, etc. So some of the ways, and my autism, for example, is there's this scale with various points to look at where you are on the spectrum. And so there's different ranges. There's like 0 to, I want to say, 20 something, which is no, and then different ranges in between, with the highest being, I think, 44 to 50 or something like that. And I scored right in the middle of that. So I scored very high on the spectrum. But then there was another score that was kind of interesting to me because it showed very low on sort of what they call the empathy quotient. And it showed that I was very high on the spectrum with very low empathy. And in my mind, I was really confused because I was like, that doesn't make sense. I've always tried to listen to people, etc. And what that meant was that I have a very difficult time understanding emotions, which is very true. Growing up, I can never understand context. I never understood people. If someone was trying to be sarcastic or say something with an underlying tone, I never picked it up. And so that would then result in me coming off as rude because if someone came up to me and said something with a tone that entailed that they were upset and I didn't pick up on it, I would just kind of brush it off. And so I would be I've lost friendships because of that.
Mm.
I've been cast aside. I've lost friendships. People have gotten really mad at me, because of how I express myself and not picking up on those cues. And that also means for myself that I don't understand my own emotions. And so I've struggled my whole life with a lot of anxiety as well. And that's, thinking to myself was like, well, how can this be? Because I live a really good like, I have a really great family. Everything seems fine. Why am I always seeming upset? Why do I always seem anxious, etc.? And for my type of autism, there's very specific structures, for example, or very specific components that for me impact my day-to-day life. Noises, crowds, being in school where you're all of a sudden interacting with 25 other kids and trying to understand all of their conversations I can't do. I have a really difficult time doing that. And routines. Routines is something that I still struggle with, which is a benefit in running to some extent, but then also a curse in others. And I would love to, later expand upon that. But
But when
so
you when you
mhm,
say that, are you struggling to have routines, or do you really need to have routines?
I need to have a
Yeah,
routine.
yeah,
So I struggle when I can't follow that.
right.
And so as you grow up, people will change things last minute and that's the thing is the expectation of what to come. That's why when I listen to music, I listen to the same ones because I know them, they're familiar to me, I know what to expect of them, and I'm fine. The second something changes or there's something unknown or something is different, like a friend changes plans, someone comes in late, etc. For most people, that's no big deal. But for me, even like the change, I'll never forget this. I was with my mom recently, and earlier that day, she's told me that she was planning on making something for dinner. And then that night, I saw what she was making and it wasn't what she planned. And I had the most stressed, concerned expression because it wasn't what I was expecting. And that can come off as rude to a lot of people because 'cause they're like, "Why are you being so exaggerated or picky?" Or when I have these vivid memories in 5th grade where I was trying to do a math test, and I spent 15 minutes just sharpening my pencil and crying because I couldn't get my pencil sharpened the right way.
But when you're talking about this, right? Like, and I feel like this is the same with anxiety and everything. These things don't necessarily make sense, but the way you are talking about it now, it seems like you are kind of aware that this is not. I don't want to use the word normal, but like that this isn't like I shouldn't be upset about this kind of. That's kind of what
E
you're
ex
saying.
Absolutely, and that's why I thought I was broken. Like, my whole life,
Yeah.
I could never communicate, and so that's what ended up happening is I can't communicate to people why I'm so upset and what is causing me so much disruption because no one else understands it, so I'm just gonna keep
Mhm.
it to myself, and
But
that has caused a lot of then issues down the line up until, now.
yeah, but that I totally understand that that is a challenge. But where if you were to look at, you know, when you refer to that situation with your mom and the cooking, so at what point do you, because now that you're talking about it, it
Mhm.
seems like you're like, of course, that's not really a problem. It doesn't really matter. But at the moment, or in the moment, you are obviously then very upset about it. So
Mhm.
at what time is it that you are able to kind of look at that and be like, oh yeah, that was just like a small change that doesn't really matter?
It takes me some time. So it's actually like for that instance, it was fairly quick because I still like I love my mom's cooking, so I was like, this is delicious. It just took me very little time. But for other instances where someone was late to like a meetup or someone last minute changed something or I was expecting, for example, to use an ingredient that then someone else used and I didn't know, so I couldn't make what I wanted to have that day. It could take me a few days to then fully calm down and realize that wasn't a problem. But those 2 days, my heart rate is elevated, my mind is racing, my breathing is heavy, and my sleep is impacted. I have not gotten this good quality sleep in my entire life since I started now start therapy and I've started medication. I'm not ashamed to share that because for me that was something that was extremely difficult and being able to get good quality sleep has made the most incredible impact in everything, not just in running, because obviously when you get good sleep, you finally rest and you finally wake up rejuvenated. But to be able to wake up and not be at the same level of exhaustion, fatigue, physical and mental and anxiety, you go about life very differently.
Yeah, I can imagine because there are a lot of things that are kind of unpredictable with when as long as you're dealing with people, obviously
And
it's
life.
gonna, yeah, and life it's hard and things change. And so then a question, because now that we were supposed to have this conversation at 11 and then I
Mhm,
had a VO2 max test with my fiance that kind of lasted a bit longer, and so I texted you and said, is it okay to do 11:15?
mhm,
Is that the kind of thing that can cause
mhm.
kind of an upset or distress for you?
Yeah, now because I've started therapy and again I'm taking medication, etcetera, that wasn't a big issue and it took me a second, but I was completely fine. But before that in my whole life, absolutely, that would have sent me absolutely
Wow.
spiraling. Which again, when people think about it, it's like it's only 15 minutes. But in your mind or in my mind, I have a very structured idea and view of how everything is supposed to go. And so when something small changes that, it's extremely impacting. And
Hmm.
so it just causes a level of anxiety that a lot of people don't understand,
Yeah.
but is has impacted again, it's impacted my sleep. It's also impacted my digestion. I've ended up weekends just laying in bed because 'cause I've had horrible GI and, acid reflux problems, and my mom growing up, she's always like, "Oh, it's probably, you're probably just nervous for something," and in my mind, I was like, "How can I be nervous all the time 24/7? Like, that's just not possible." And then I realized, "Oh, actually, if I walk and I go into the center of the city where there's people and loud music and loud noises, that is extremely stressful to me."
Yeah. Wow. But so my first thought was when you said that you like that it stresses you out when things change.
Mhm,
Like, um, if my fiance found herself in the same situation, I hope that like I would just know that okay, I need to take precautions to
mhm,
make sure that we don't really change things that much.
mhm.
And uh, I'm also like I'm the kind of person who like if you told me beforehand that because you were open about having autism, and if you then told me that just so you know because of that it's important that we stick to that schedule. Honestly, like if you told me that like 2 days ago, I would be like, yeah, okay, fine. So in general, I'm just curious if you are then are you able to, or have you gotten better at kind of clarifying those
Mm,
expectations to others? And I'm
yeah.
guessing that it's harder to new people that you barely know,
It's
but
yeah, it's definitely a struggle because I don't want necessarily people to all of a sudden completely change around me. Like, I don't want people to be concerned of how they interact with me. I don't want people to be scared to talk to me or make plans with me, etc. But in my immediate circles, so to my family or to very close friends, I have expressed that, hey, I need a little bit of patience and very clear communication about when, we schedule something or when something all of a sudden is different or there's those, um, unknowns. I kind of need to know or like be more mindful of communicating that to me. And especially, for example, now with running, where if I can't really do my routine and I can't really get that going, it impacts me greatly negatively. And so having that also with my family being like, "Hey, we can absolutely do plans on Saturday. Can you just tell me ahead of time because I need to get I have a run scheduled and I really want to do my routine, etc." Um, they've been super, their response has been absolutely the most amazing, loving response I think I could have ever gotten. Not that I ever doubted it for a second, but immediately they were so receptive and so hyper aware then of everything else that, you know, before they never even gave it a second thought or would tell me why are you so stressed out? And now that we all have that understanding and that explanation, if I am like, I really for example, before the flight to New York, I knew that I to self-regulate, to help my mind, and to just ease, if I could do my same routine that morning before getting on that flight to New York, I would just feel a lot better. And years past, my parents would be like, "What? Just don't. Like, just we're getting up early. We have to be at the airport at 7:30 in the morning. Just don't." Whereas now I was able to sit down with my mom and tell her, it's like, "Hey, I know it's gonna be early and I know I have to get up very early to do this, but please let me do my routine because that's just gonna help me be in a much better mindset getting on that flight and getting to New York," which in and of itself had its other really difficult emotional complications returning to New York. Um, but having that conversation then allowed her to fully understand why I do what I do and just allow me that space being like, "Okay, just be prepared at 7:30 to get to the airport and we'll be good." And I was able to do my routine, no questions, no, side eye, nothing.
Wow. But has it been easier for you to communicate this to family and friends after September when you were
Yes.
diagnosed with it? Or were you also communicating this before?
I would try to communicate things before, but it was never understood. And so it was n I then kind of stopped, and I just kind of decided, "Okay, clearly it's something that's wrong on my side, so I just have to figure out how to fix myself." And or there's been times where I would actually hide, for example, waking up at 4 AM to get my routine going because I knew that they wouldn't understand. So I would do it and then come back and try to get everything sorted and not make it seem like I left. Um, because to me or figure out another way to get my routine done quietly to not get questions, or if then they did, if I came back and they saw me, they'd, ask me, and they'd be kind of very confused and, just really not understanding what was going on. At least in my mind, I was like, "They don't understand me and they're gonna be upset and whatnot." That's another stress that I'm gonna have to manage, but at least my routine is complete.
Yeah. Wow. No, I totally understand what you mean because I feel like as soon as you have, and in my opinion, it shouldn't have to be just a diagnosis, but it could also be just like, this really stresses me out. Please
Yeah.
just look at it as a diagnosis or whatever, but just like, this is how I work and please just adjust to that. Or, yeah,
Yeah. But it can be very challenging, and I,
yeah,
recognize now, like, I've been told by my sister and my family that there were times where I would say something or behave in a certain way, like, I would just at events or parties, I would completely zone out, and I would just sit there absolutely looking like I was not enjoying myself at all because I couldn't leave, but I was so overwhelmed by everything, all the people, everyone talking, everyone moving around, not knowing when we were gonna do anything, not knowing when we were gonna leave. So I would just completely turn into a robot and completely just sit there and have a really good difficult time talking to people. I would be exhausted and everything, and I was always perceived as like, why are you being rude? Like, why do you look so angry all the time? Why are you look so upset and miserable?" Where and in my mind, I was miserable, but because I was in an environment that wasn't designed for my enjoyable experience.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely something to navigate, and like you said, with running, but also in general in life. And I feel like, growing up, I'm pretty sure my one of my like my dad, I think one of his favorite movies is Rain Man.
Mhm.
And have you seen that movie?
I haven't. I actually I actually don't like movies. I don't watch a
Okay.
lot of movies,
Okay.
and that's because, again, I don't understand what's going on. I don't
No.
understand. I can't really follow the conversations. I can't follow the different emotions. So I just kind of I see the acts and I get no sort of I just see the movements, I hear the
Hmm.
dialogues, but I don't I have such a difficult time connecting. So I don't really watch a lot of movies, so I'm sorry to
No,
anyone
no, you're
listening
good.
who's like, "How could you not?"
No, no, you're good. I just wanted to ask you because, like, I don't know if you heard about it, but anyways, it's just like this guy with autism, and he's a genius, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
super smart, and
Yeah.
I think it's Tom Cruise who kind of plays his, if it's his brother or something like that, but he kind of takes advantage of how smart this
Yeah.
guy is, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I think I'm forever grateful to my dad for kind of implementing that thought in me, that he was like, people with autism, they're just super smart. And so I grew up always thinking about it in that way.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I'm talking about this is just I'm curious because it seems like you have, a pretty good job, and your career has, you've built a good career for yourself.
Yep.
And then, mm, it seems like you're then smart and you're good at what you're doing,
Yeah.
but it might have been challenging to kind of get there because of, like you said, life, school system changes
Yep.
and things. How has that been? And
Mhm.
I would love to hear just the pros and the cons of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it has a lot of benefits. I think it has a lot of disadvantages, especially in a world that's constantly changing, very social, especially in Madrid, where everyone is very social. People here don't really follow schedules. Everyone's like, oh, let's just go on the fly. And I'm like, absolutely not. Please don't do this to me. But it's really interesting because when I got or when I did the assessment, people don't realize this. I was there for 5 hours. It was a 5 hour long assessment, very in depth, very focused to really understand, okay, what is going on? Like, what are you experiencing and what is the cause of it? And part of that was actually just a regular, like, cognitive assessment, understanding how good are you at memory, how good are you at math, how good are you at basic facts, etc. And on those, I scored higher than the average. So I actually, if you told me 6 numbers at random numbers in random order, I could very well memorize them and tell them in order backwards and then put them in numerical order from increasing or decreasing. Or I would get asked mathematical questions and they want to time how long it would take me to answer, and I would be able to give the answer before the doctor had even time to start the timer. So I was already there like, "Oh yeah, it's 7." And they're like, "Oh, yes, okay." Um, and so it's, growing up then it made being a good academic student, I would say, easy, or easier, especially because one of the other things that's different, for example, from ADHD is people who have ADHD typically will tend to want to start a lot of different things and have a really difficult time finishing anything. So they might start on 10 different projects and then not finish any of them. I have the
Yeah,
different
I'm
problem.
more like that.
Yeah. So I have a different problem is if I know that I can't finish something, I don't start. So when I go in something, I go all in, I fully invest, and if I can't finish it, I don't start, which becomes really bad in certain circumstances, like really good, for example, academically, because if I'm given an assignment, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to start as soon as possible and I'm going to get it done and I'm going to sit there until it's done. But then the cons are what happens if that takes you into midnight? What happens if you do it, but there's something about it that you don't like, and so you're redoing it all over again? I've found myself rewriting notebooks because I didn't like how they were done, and so I would then sit there. And in running, because I need the routine and because I'm so um dedicated and I've decided I want to do this and I'm going to get it done, it's super easy for me to wake up at 4 AM, eat my breakfast, get out at 4:30, 5 AM, do my, 16-kilometer run or whatever it is that I have that day, and then come back, shower, get dressed, have breakfast, and go to work. Like, that's very easy for me because if I don't have that, I am more stressed, I have more anxiety, and I'm have a much difficult time just continuing on in my day than if I do. But then the negative is, well, what happens if there's situations completely outside of your control that you can't do that? What happens if you have a 6 AM flight, and so to get there, you have to be at the airport at 4:30 in the morning? What are you gonna do? Are you gonna sleep literally 2 hours? I've done that. Don't recommend. And in hindsight, that was not a smart thing to do because I was losing sleep. I would then just not be energized. Um, and so there's aspects where people are like, "Oh, I could never wake up at that hour to do your run." And in my mind, I'm like, "You don't understand that if I don't, I am a completely different person."
Wow. Yeah, because now you started referring to the running, and I assume that most people listening to this will be like, well, this sounds like a challenge as a runner. And I think that a lot of marathon runners, and I'm not saying everyone, but I think a lot of marathon runners will kind of dream about the majors and the really
Big
big ones.
Yeah.
It sounds like that is almost your worst nightmare.
A little bit, I'm not gonna lie. When I think back at the races I've done, some of the most enjoyable ones were actually the quieter ones. So, for example, Indianapolis, where at the beginning there's a lot of people, but then as soon as the half marathon and the marathon splits, there's a lot less people. And there I was completely in the zone, very relaxed, and just very focused. Or Eugene, where again, the first, 10 miles you're running, with a lot of crowds, but even there, they're kind of more sporadic. Then as soon as you split from the half marathon, you start going on the trails right by the river, very silent, very quiet, and for me, that silent, calm, because running a marathon at, a 4:15-minute kilometer is not calm, but that quiet outdoor experience is the most regulating thing I do. I go on a outside by myself without listening to music and just exist, basically, and move outside every single day, whether that's for a run or it's for a walk. And I go and there's people like, "Oh, can I join you on your walk?" And there's been times where I said, "No, I appreciate that, but we'll go on a different walk if you want, but I need this hour to myself to be able to go and just relax and be with quiet." And so running races like New York City or Boston, when all of a sudden you go through the screen tunnel, everyone is there being like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I can't wait. I'm so excited for the noise and the music." And in my mind, I'm like, I am going to explode through this experience. And I just have to figure out what to do
Because have you done
because
Boston?
I have.
Yeah,
Boston, I actually, funny enough, qualified for Boston in my first marathon. So I was able
cool.
Boston was my 3rd. Um, and Chicago was my 2nd. So Chicago was actually I got in with the lottery. And, people always are like, "Oh, this is such an amazing experience because all the noise and the cheering." It's like, yeah, that gives me a energy up to an extent, and then I can't manage anymore. And that then becomes just a mental battle of listen to your music, Try just not focus on the outside. Don't listen to the crowds because those are just gonna make you feel worse. And when I run, I actually try to find the spot where there's fewer runners. So when I run, I always stay a little bit behind. I stay at the outside, or I try actually to be a little bit in front of, for example, the pace group. Not because I'm trying to, be the pacer or whatnot. It's literally just running in this group is giving me just such a horrible feeling that I have to have my own space. And so in the corrals, people are like, "How are you managing that?" And I'm just like, "I'm not. I'm just trying to get to the start and I'm there just breathing and trying to regulate, but I'm not having a good time in the corrals. I'm not having a good time."
But does that mean that the perfect marathon for you would have been almost like a time trial without spectators?
For almost, or one with very few spectators. For example, again, Eugene, where there was very sporadic group of spectators and whatnot, where the boost really comes from the community, like the runners around you, and a little bit from the outside because it's always fun to see signs and see all
Yes,
the different
so
people
you're
cheering.
able to enjoy that part of it to some
I
extent.
just absolutely. It's just when then it gets overwhelmingly loud, like, to the point where people are like, "Oh, it's so loud, you can't hear your own music." It was like that I can't I have a very difficult time, and thankfully, again, now I'm with a therapist, I'm taking medication, and I don't think people should be, um, really embarrassed to admit that. Like, for me, starting medication, I have noticed, and I'm coached by Jeff, so you've had him multiple times, you've had a lot of his athletes on, I've listened to a lot of their episodes as well, but, even I've been talking to him, it's like, I have not gotten this good quality sleep in my life, really, and he was like, "Your workouts have been insane, like, very spot on and very, you know, like, impressive." And it's like, "Yeah, it's because I'm finally waking up not feeling absolutely drained. Not from the running, but from life."
Yeah. But what happens, or have you had injuries where because that is something that if you get injured or you get sick, that
Mhm.
obviously will interrupt
Yep,
your plans for the, I assume.
absolutely. Absolutely, and it's happened many a times. The last injury I've had, which knock on wood has been quite a while, was actually when I was training for, Chicago, and I had a really nasty case of Achilles tendonitis, so it was just really, really painful, and I still ran through that. Don't recommend, please do not do that. But in my mind, I was like, "I have to get this done." Like, I signed up for this marathon. I committed to being, this coach. I've committed to these runs and these workouts. If I don't do this, I just can't sleep. I can't sleep, and I have a really, really, really hard time. And then all other aspects, it's like, okay, for example, I've had a wisdom teeth removed. So I've had to actually schedule them to figure out, okay, when is the best time to do them? Because it's a time where, for example, I can't run because I'm recovering from the marathon. So I've had wisdom teeth surgery 2 days after running the Chicago Marathon because I knew that that week I was told that I had to, lay in bed, and so I was like, "Okay, this is the only time I can do this because I don't want this to impact everything else."
Yeah, because that was kind of my next question in terms of, because what you said there is interesting. You said that that's when you know that you're told to lie in bed or to recover anyways.
Mhm.
And you do hear about a lot of athletes. Some athletes, they don't really want to hear or know what they're doing next week. They just want like a plan from day to day. It sounds like you are more the kind of person who needs a structured plan. And so like working with Jeff, how long, like the training program or plan that you have, how
Mhm.
far into the future does that go, and how far into the
Mhm.
future do you need it to be to kind of relax and
Yeah.
feel comfortable with that.
Yeah. So when we started it like, when I first started with him, it was actually 2 weeks, and for me, I was like, "Okay, I know 2 weeks ahead. Excellent. This is great." Now it's every week, so at the end of the week, I can see most of it, or the entire week. But there's been a few times where starting the week, I would only see, like, 2 days or 3 days, and I wouldn't see the rest until the end of that period. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be honest, I actually still haven't talked about that and or talked about how that has sort of given me some frustrations or more than frustration, just anxiety and nerves. Because again, in my mind, I was like, why do you care about what you're doing 2 weeks in advance? Like, you're not there yet. Why does it matter to you? But to me, I look at it, I was like, and this might sound really weird and exaggerated, or that's what I've been always told, but having that level of knowledge just gives me comfort, which then becomes a negative when something changes and I can't follow it. And that's what I'm starting to work with my therapist. That's what I'm starting to learn slowly how to navigate. And more than anything, also slowly learn how everything makes me feel. Because again, one of the biggest issues is not understanding how I feel. And so now going through that exercise of, is this actually causing me anxiety? Is this causing me sadness? Is this causing me anger? And then knowing how to interact with that has been very important. And so now having a week ahead is like, if I know the full week, I'm mainly calm. I would prefer if I could have 2 weeks, honestly, just like 2 weeks of information. But I've just learned, and that's the trickiest part, or the you know, 24 years of living with undiagnosed autism, you learn really by force how to manage and exist. And so one thing that I never realized was, you don't actually see this, but I actually have here a ring that spins, because I've learned that for me, hand gestures and hand sort of moving and rubbing and things like that, I do that to self-regulate. Like, I'm constantly
Uh-huh.
doing this, and there was something I never realized myself until the therapist noted it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do." And so I now have this to just help me with breathing exercises, and then that so I know everything is okay.
Smart. Wow.
Yeah.
It's very impressive when you hear about this, and it does sound like, you know, the strength that you have in terms of like as long as you know 2 weeks in advance, then that is like that gives you comfort, that will make you feel more relaxed. But at the
Mhm.
same time, that can also be a disadvantage, because then if something changes with
Yep,
those 2 weeks, that is a problem. So I can definitely
absolutely.
see that. Obviously, in general, that is difficult. And like we talk about, if you get sick, if you get
Mhm,
injured, if something comes up. But also within sports, I
mhm.
would almost guess that a lot of athletes who are, you know, at a high level and who are able to, because if you're at a very high level, you will just kind of demand structure from the people around you. So my guess would be that there are some athletes who might not even notice, or they will probably notice, but they will not notice to that extent how how much that would challenge them in an everyday life, because as an athlete they are able to control everything, right? Like
Right.
obviously you can't control the outcome of your competition or how you're doing in training, but
Mhm.
you can control, like when we're doing this, when we're having lunch, when we're having that meeting, and then you're like, you can actually just tell people very clearly that no, that's not
Mhm.
okay, because that's gonna interrupt my
Right.
training or disrupt my program. Yeah.
And as someone who I mean, I would love, one of my biggest dreams is to be able to run a race in a pro field. I would
Yeah.
absolutely to represent, be an Italian in the professional field, even if it's a small race or something that I really wanna strive for that, and I feel like at 24, I still have a long way to go to improve, and so I'm really excited for that, but it's definitely I'm still like, I have a job, I have, family, I kinda do this on my own, and so when I would tell people, like, like, "Oh, just skip your run or just don't do this." And I tried to explain to them, "No, no, no. I really wanna get this done and I really wanna do this." It's, you know, it's then for them, it's like, why are you like, I can't understand it. Whereas if you were in the profession, I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, that's your job. Of course. Yes, prioritize
Yeah.
that." Where for me, it's like, "It's a hobby.
Hmm.
Calm down." Um, and the other aspect was in a world for me as well, in a world where everything is so out of hand, you then begin to hyper control everything that you can. And to me, that also included food. And so trying to be an athlete while controlling and restricting food, um, not a good combination. Let me just tell you that. And so that also has been a very difficult but important conversation to have with my family and with myself and with my therapist and be really upfront and really honest. Because in my world, when everything was out of hand, when everything was just going wrong, when people weren't liking me, when people kept saying that I was weird and different, etc. And the only thing that I could control was how much I was eating. And the only time I felt accepted was when I looked smaller. That just led me to this logical chain of, okay, I guess I have to hyper control my food and make sure that that's as little as possible. Um, and so now knowing that and realizing my need of control expanded beyond the positive walls of routine and being such a good student because I organize all my assignments, I organize all my workload. I'm very structured in my workday and in my in getting I'm very disciplined with getting my training done, etc. A lot of people will see that positive side and then miss to see, yeah, I'm so disciplined that I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and not sleep because I have to get this run in. And then I'm so disciplined that I'm going to, if there's not the meal that I was perfectly planning on having, I will just not eat.
Right. Yeah, it seems like, and obviously what you touched on here
Mhm.
is that you kind of ended up struggling with food and nutrition, and
Yep.
that is a challenge. But I'm not going to dive more into that one right now because we're at the end of our conversation. But it seems like there are a lot of things that you can kind of end up getting just as a consequence
Yep.
of this. And
Mhm.
one thing that strikes me also there, like when you're talking about this, because I've been open about, my challenges with anxiety and how running has really helped that.
Yep.
But I also know that, for instance, when I was younger, I didn't fly at all. So I was like scared of flying. And I got to a point where I was just so tired of being scared of flying that I had to just make some changes. And so I read a book and then I started flying a little bit. But I did kind of push myself to do it. And I
Yep.
think that, like, from like if I was to just listen to my body, listen to all my instincts, I would just never fly because that wouldn't make
I
sense. And
yeah.
that's what my question to you, because you were talking about wanting to be in the elite field. You've done Chicago, you've done New York, you've done Boston. So it's
Yep.
kind of like these big marathons that seems like they're super toxic to you and horrible
Yeah.
in some ways. What
Mhm.
is it you think that kind of just makes you still go do them and push yourself out of that comfort zone?
I love to run. I grew up, as I said before, I grew up playing golf, and I was always so frustrated with that sport. I loved it for so long, but I could never compete. And I think one of the reasons why is because I wasn't getting the same sort of relief, physical relief that I would get from running. And then the other thing is golf is a very precise sport, and so not getting the exact shot that you want, to me, was extremely frustrating, and I could never manage that. So I never was able I tried to come and play varsity, in college, and I was just not enjoying it, so I actually didn't even finish my 4 years playing golf. I only played for a year and a half. Um, and so for me running, I've started running without headphones because to me running in the morning when there's no one around, going into a park where there's very few people and just being silent is extremely relieving. And to be able to accomplish something to for myself is the best feeling. Like, finishing a run that I was like, I woke up tired and I still got it done, I feel great. Getting that movement to me again is very like, self-regulating, being outdoors. Even if I can't so now, for example, Sundays are my day off, and funny enough, Sundays are actually the most almost stressful days for me because it's like, I don't have my routine, what do I do? So, when I was in Pittsburgh, I didn't realize it, but I actually created my own routine, which was I'd wake up, I would go for a walk, I would come back, I would bake something. I would always bake muffins on a Sunday, and then I would go see some friends and go to yoga or climbing. But that was a very set routine that I had. And so now coming back, I told my family, it's like, "Hey, can I please bake every Sunday?" And my parents are like, "Please do. We're not gonna complain about muffins on a Sunday." I was like, "Excellent," because I need that. But because that movement to me is just has such a positive impact on my day and my life and my anxiety and my depression and everything, I just really want to pursue this. And I realized also that I was good at it. I realized that, okay, if I set myself to do this, I'm actually pretty good. To run a first marathon after not running a half marathon before, the most I ran as a race was 10 miles, which is 16 kilometers. Growing up playing golf, and to run a 3:22 my first try, and then, in the next 5 marathons go sub 3, and now in New York, I was running at like, very comfortable, a sub 3, like, and obviously in quotes, but a very comfortable sub 3, pace. I ended up running 3 hours and 18 minutes because I, stopped to, see a runner on the course that wasn't feeling well, so was there, and I was just really enjoying the race, so I had such a difficult few months that this race for me was purely for enjoyment, to not add another layer of, "What if I don't get the time that I want?" But because of that, it's like, I really don't want to be like, if I had to not go to things because of how I felt, I would never leave my room. I would never go to a restaurant. I would never go into an office. I would never go outside when there's other people. And that's not what I want to do. And so, because of that, it's like, okay, these types of environments, very overwhelming. I will find the most isolated sort of solo spot, not because I'm antisocial, not because I don't like you, because you're currently sitting in a group with other 30 people having 5 conversations very loudly at the same time, and I just can't manage that right now. And so because of that, if just like you, if I, moved with how I felt, I would never fly. But then you wouldn't be able to pursue your
Exactly.
passion, experience you wouldn't be able to run Boston because you can't you might be able to get a boat, I don't know how many there are, you know? And now, especially with having struggled and mostly overcome, anorexia, having struggled with the impacts of living with undiagnosed autism for my whole life, I want to be able to help someone else be like, "Oh, I can do this. It's
Yeah.
difficult, and it's people might not understand it, and people might think that what I do is different, or me wearing I have earbuds that I'm constantly wearing,
Mhm.
because to me that controls the noise. I have this ring that I spin, and people would be like, "What? Can you stop fidgeting?" Um, and to me, it's like, you know what? I am going to explain this to those that are around me that care about me because they're gonna listen, and they're gonna then be much more aware of my needs. And again, just being a little bit more sensitive and just patient. But I'm
Mhm.
not gonna let this stop me because
No.
I wanna get to places. I wanna experience things. And, if that means having another mechanism, going into a different area of the location, taking a step out, and then coming back in 20 minutes later, that's what I'm gonna do.
I think that it's interesting because when you're talking about this, you talk about it as it's like, of course, that's what you're gonna do, and I love that because that says a lot about you, and I hope that it kind of serves as an inspiration to others, because I feel like it can also, and I'm sure you've had that too, and I've had that, right? Like there are also times where you wish that you were more courageous and just kind of went out and did it. There might have been times where you just spent your day in your room or whatever, but just like in general,
Yeah.
overall, that you have that attitude is great.
I mean, I've come back in tears because I got so frustrated because of why I couldn't be out with people. I get extremely frustrated when I have friends being like, "Hey, do you wanna go with us to this bar and hang out at 10 PM until we don't know when?" And in my mind, I'm like, "I wish I could." I have a concert to go, with my sister, and I'm so excited for it, but at the same time, I know that those types of environments are very triggering for me, and so I'm
Yeah.
frustrated because it's like, why can't I just go and enjoy this with my sister? But I'm still trying, and if
Hmm.
that means and I've talked about this with her, and I think that's the biggest piece is really talking about it with people, and if they care about you, they will understand and they will be
Yeah.
patient. Because I told my sister and I was like, "Listen, I'm really excited for this, but if I have to leave or take a step outside, please don't think negatively about it. Just let me
Hmm.
do my thing. You stay and enjoy your time. And if it's something that I have to do, I just have to do it. And it's nothing against you. And I don't want you to ruin your own experience."
Hmm. Exactly. Kiara, we have 1 or 2 minutes left here, but I have two smaller or big questions, but probably short answers to it. I would just like, first of all, say thank you, because I think that you did mention that you're hoping that it will inspire people. We talked about it before our chat that you also would love to hear other people's experiences with this. And I'm hoping that for you, whether it's comments on this, like when they post it on Instagram or the podcast or YouTube, but also for you that you will get some messages and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you can interact with people who are dealing with the same challenges. So,
Hmm.
so I want to thank you for being so open about all of this. And I feel like you already answered that question a little bit, but I guess we can make it a yes or no question. But do you feel like this is much easier to deal with because you're running?
Yes. Because running, again, is my form of self regulating and gives me so much peace. And I'm a completely different person. And so managing all of this while doing something I love so much and that gives me so much calm is so much easier.
Yeah.
So overall, that's why I keep doing it
Hmm.
because the cons are not outweighed by the overall benefits and joys of this.
Yeah. That's really cool. And then the last question is, because when you're talking about some of these things, I can't help but think that, wow, some of these things, it sounds like me or it sounds like someone I know. And I don't know, but it seems like some of those traits could also just be traits that we have totally regardless of this, obviously.
Absolutely. Yep.
But then I'm curious, because for you, it took you 24 years, like you said, to be
Mhm.
diagnosed.
Yeah.
And so for anyone feeling like, oh, I'm checking a bit, like I'm checking a lot of these boxes
Mhm.
and I have been struggling with these things, things are challenging. How did you get to the point where you were able to, they checked and figured out that, or diagnosed
Yeah.
you kind of?
Yeah, so it's definitely when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm also sensitive to noises, like I have to wear earbuds when I sleep," or, "Oh yeah, I'm also really sensitive to this or textures or clothing," and like I have pieces of clothing that I literally cannot wear because it is causes physical just discomfort and mental discomfort. So everyone has similar traits. The real difference is how much is this impacting you? Is this causing you consistent daily just a negative experience on life? I've ended up in hospitals because I've had so much anxiety that I've had gastritis. I have struggled with acid reflux due to my anxiety. I have lost sleep. I have now clinical depression and anxiety because of it. And all of this because the plate that I wanted to use was not there. That can clearly frustrate a lot of people, but the real difference is is this actually then negatively impacting your life? And for me, it is. And I was really lucky because there was my at my dad's job, they actually had professionals from the same foundation that I went to. It's called in Spain, or in Madrid at least, Fundación Querer, and they went to their job to really promote the importance of mental well-being and mental health. And when I had already expressed a little bit of this to my parents before, because going from living alone to 3 years to then this drastic change of returning home, being now with my whole family, not having my space, etc., he came to me and was like, "Hey, we got this assessment done at a very high level, but we can reach out to get a more in-depth assessment." And I'm so thankful that I could afford it. I'm so grateful that my parents supported it. And so that's how I got assessed. But I think the biggest piece was actually before that, which was even before getting assessed, I had a very clear conversation with my family. Like a sit down being like, I'm trying to understand what's going on, but there's these things that I have a really difficult time, and I need you to just understand. And so to anyone who's also struggling with things like this, I just want to say, one, you're not alone. I know how you feel. I completely understand. You're not alone. You're not an alien. You're not broken. You are just trying to survive. You are currently just trying to develop literal survival skills in a world that wasn't designed for you. And that's okay. We're all different. We all learn differently. We all experience life differently. And you just have to figure out now, okay, what can I do to make this really stressful existence more enjoyable? And having that communication and that conversation with those that love you and those that you love, they're going to listen. And they're going to and that's how I realized a lot of people in my life either were really my friends and really cared about me, or people that I realized later on, it's like, wow, this is actually not someone who genuinely took my frustrations or my emotions or the way that I was feeling seriously. And that is very hurtful, but then it helps you understand who really cares about you. And so I just want to let you know that having this conversation is scary, but it's okay. And I want you to know that you can get to a place where life gets a little bit lighter.
I love that. Thank you for that message and for saying that. And I also hope that this chat that we've had, that a lot of people will listen to it and that people will kind of feel less lonely, but also feel like, oh, okay, I have some of these things myself, and
Mhm.
maybe like seek, I don't know if it's your general practitioner that you kind of approach first and say that I have
Mhm.
these symptoms. I heard about that. Is this
Yeah.
like I don't know where you
Yeah.
start, but I guess that's where you kind of start.
Yeah, I really wouldn't know because every medical system is also different. The
Yeah.
US medical system different from Italy, Spain, Norway, etc.
Hmm.
But even just trying to reach out to your doctor, like they're
Yeah.
going to be able to probably tell you, okay, this is where you would need to go, and be very I think the biggest thing is protect yourself. What
Hmm.
you're experiencing is real. The
Yeah.
stress that you're feeling is real, and don't let anyone else tell you that you're exaggerating and that you're imagining things.
Nope.
Your experience is true, real, and important. And that's what I want people to understand and be able to then take control of a life that is so chaotic.
Yeah. Thank you, Kiara. I am so happy that you wanted to come on the podcast and talk about this. And I also hope that you'll, reach your dream of becoming an elite marathoner. At 24, you still have a lot of marathon years in you. So good
Yeah.
luck. And thank you so much again for guesting the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I could come on and giving me this opportunity. I'm truly, truly thankful. So, yeah.
No, thank you.
It's after conversations like these that I'm just blown away. I'm so impressed, and I'm, admiring Chiara for being so open, but also admiring her for her persistence and just sticking to running and not giving up. And it would have been easier to just stay at home with all of the challenges or things that she's facing. So I really appreciate Chiara taking the time and really appreciate her sharing her story. In the next episode, we're having Sean on. And Sean, he is someone that fairly recently got his OTQ qualifier. He is now a 2:15 marathoner. And it's a very impressive one of that because he has a lot of things going on. He has a full-time job, and he might be a dad at the time this episode comes out, but he's just a genuinely nice guy, and I'm excited for you guys to hear more about the 2:15 runner he ran in Indy, and so you might have seen him on the results there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Really appreciate you being here, and I'll talk to you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wild Studio.